Thank you for coming to the very first visiting speaker. It's probably worth pointing out, you may have heard that we've had budget cuts. The visiting speaker used to be a year-long programme, and now what's happening is it's just going to be restricted to this first semester. So it'll only be between now and Christmas that you're going to have the opportunity to have, well-selected practitioners within your discipline and from outside come to speak to you. People talking about actually doing that thing that you're studying. So it's really valuable that you're here. The second semester currently looks like it's going to be screenings. That could be really valuable. I'm in charge of that as well. I'm thinking that I'm going to put stuff together for things that you should see in a kind of finger-wagging way. Maybe we'll look at some surrealist films and we'll do showings over a couple of weeks and stuff like that. So we'll equally have a culturally diverse programme, but it's only speakers for this first semester. Next week there is a speaker. It's going to be Kim Thompson, and she's a freelance illustrator. However, this week's visiting speaker, who I won't say too much about because she'll introduce herself, is Robyn Woolston, who is an artist who works in a kind of multimedia, multidisciplinary fashion. So, thank you.
Hello everyone, it's a pleasure to meet you all. I'm an interdisciplinary practitioner and I graduated from my BA in Fine Art in 2007. Went on to do an MA in research at Manchester, but before that, in 2000, did a degree in film. So I've gone and had a completely different life to start with in some respects, and then I brought it back around to what it is that I really always wanted to do. Okay, so you can catch me on my website here. At the end, I'll give you some other links. I'm pretty active on Twitter, so if some of what I'm talking about today, I'm going to go into quite a lot of detail in quite a short space of time. I will leave the presentation with Steve, so you've got a copy of it, and hopefully you'll have a portal that we can put it onto. But I do communicate in 140 characters as well, so I'm really behind that as a... What was that? Okay, so I'm just going to go through a few definitions to start with. And one of the things is that I would say to you is that what it is I do maps across art and activism between the environment and ecology and contemporary fine art practice. It's an interdisciplinary space, and some people call it inter-silo. So two big silos of knowledge. Often people within the art field are a little bit sniffy about the fact that I work environmentally, and often people within the environmental field say, well, I'm not just an activist, what are you doing, painting pictures or making installations? And I quite like that discomfort. That's quite a nice place to operate out of. It gives me lots of breathing space as well, and it means I can shatter a lot of the illusions about what art is, where it's supposed to be, and I can really play with people's sense of value. So if really quickly I go through ecology, the branch of biology that deals with the relationships of organisms to one another and their physical surroundings. It's also a political movement concerned with the protection of the environment. This will all fit in. Right, the title of today's talk, Wasted Space, an Ecology of Rejected Matter, Found Objects and Site-Responsive Work. So ecology, we've just talked about the fact that it's about relationships, it's about how I meet you, how I meet that piece of waste that Stephen's holding in his hand, the production processes on this bottle that I've just bought. That's part of where my work is situated. Rejected, a personal thing that's dismissed or inadequate or unacceptable. Essentially, I work with value. Value within a gallery system is something that is accrued through more people purchasing something and through your presence as an artist gaining more spectacle, a greater sense of value. So I work with what's thrown away. Sometimes that's physical things, sometimes that's emotions, it's spaces, it's places. Found objects. A natural or man-made object or fragment of an object found or sometimes bought by an artist and kept because of some intrinsic interest the artist sees in it. So that definition is from the Tate. There's lots of different links on this that will help you follow different trajectories of what it is you're interested in. I've always been interested in the inherent value in something without me adding to it in some respects, or how I can reappropriate this. What does this mean culturally? It's not just something that I purchase in terms of liquid because I feel dehydrated. It's part of a power structure. Site-responsive, site-specific, site-responsive or environmental art refers to an artist's intervention in a specific locale, a specific place, creating work that is integrated with its surroundings and that explores its relationship to the topography of its locale, whether indoors or out, urban, desert, marine or otherwise. So, what that means is that I go to different places, sometimes more often than not they're not a gallery environment. I look at who uses that space, what the history of that space is, what that space is telling me before I even start to think about what I might put into that place. So it's not always about the prominence and value of the object I place in it. The object directly responds to that place. Right, this is a really, it's a bit detailed, but I think it's good because I know some people are just at the start of their courses and some of this language might seem a bit gobbledygook or long. But at the very bottom right-hand corner, if you're fascinated in social media and Facebook and other things of this nature, I'm just going to point this out to you, academia.edu. That's an academic Facebook, so anyone that is publishing papers, that is writing about content and ideas, anyone that is saying, I think this is where this is located, but I'm not sure, what do you think about it? They're all on academia.edu. It doesn't matter if you want to become a member to start with, but you don't have anything to put on it, that is fine. But what I would say is that get used to some of the things that are your drivers and some of these titles. Now, I've put a taxonomic nail in the wall so you get a quick idea of some of the areas, and these are quite varied. Now, within education, it's always forcing you to specialise. And for some of you, that'll be very valid that you specialise in one thing, and that might be painting, that could be photography. But for other people as well, you'll realise that you are quite interdisciplinary, and all of those things are okay. It's not the fact that you're just one or the other, it's the fact that you understand what it is that gives you your unique voice, and you understand where you are placed in terms of other people. Right. I'm going to play about with this within our talk. When we think about art, we often think about galleries. They're inside, they're often owned by people. They're part of a market system. Now, I'm not saying this is right or wrong, I'm playing a little bit with you with this. Okay? So they're sometimes part of what is called a triumvirate, the gallerist, the curator, the auction house, for a certain part of the market. And we all know these artists because it's people like Damien Hirst and Tracy Emin, you know, they're like the poster kids of what it is we do. But actually, in some respects, they're a small fragment. They're a massive part of what financially drives the art market, but that's the art market. There's also a knowledge market, and I'm going to explain that further as we go on. So within that small system, but very highly influential system, value is accrued through ownership. Now, remember what I said to you about me being at the cross-section of environment and ecology or activism? Activism, when we think about it, surely that means you've got dreadlocks and you've got piercings, it's in opposition to something. I've got piercings, don't worry. Remember, I'm playing with you with some of these perspectives. It's in opposition to a company and organisation. It's supposedly democratic because everyone has a voice, and it's collective. It might seem like it works in opposition to the gallery system. So I'm going to throw these right out the water with a couple of seminal practitioners that I think it's important that you understand or you know about, so that you can then frame what it is that I do. And as the years go on, you might look back at them, they might be useful, they might not be at all. So, in 1982, Agnes Demings carried out what has become known as a seminal environmental art project when she planted a 2-acre field of wheat in a vacant lot in downtown Manhattan. Now, if I place this for you, you're talking about some of the most expensive, highly prized and sought after acreage in the world. It's Manhattan, right? The artwork yielded £1,000 of wheat in the middle of New York City to comment on human values and misplaced priorities. Okay, I'm going to bring this bottle back in again. Human values and misplaced priorities. I'm thirsty right now. I've just bought this bottle. This plastic's going to last 300 or 400 years. I've probably paid £1.20 for it. I'm going to put it in a bin that's not going to recycle this plastic. I'll say it once more. Human values and misplaced priorities. The harvested grain then travelled to 28 cities worldwide. The International Art Show for the end of the world, hunger, and was symbolically passed around the globe. Right. Here's our quick. Let me get the right one.
My name is Francesco Manacoda. I'm a curator here at the Barbican Gallery, and I have curated this exhibition, Radical Nature, which is a historical survey from the end of the 60s till today, looking at how artists and architects have collaborated with nature. For the younger generation that we are profiling here, for example, they are really pioneers and some of the work that the older generation has produced, for example, the Wheatfield by Agnes Dennis. They are all incredibly inspirational ways of looking at nature and producing the sculptures hand by hand without either of those two domains being to the detriment of the other. So sometimes the activism and the artistic and aesthetic component of the work really are married in an incredible way.
When I started this, like over 40 years ago, nobody was thinking environmentally. Today everything is green, we are all of a sudden all over it. Nobody was interested in that. And it was a struggle to get the word out, not only that it was necessary, but that we were in trouble.
Activism is a very important component of many of the artists and architect works in the exhibition. Some were, in particular the artists from the 70s generation, were directly involved in activist campaigns.
I started doing ecological oriented work, basically because there was a need for it. And also, jumping ahead, they have to be large to make an impact. So I gave up painting and jumped off the canvas and into the environment.
We look at guerrilla gardening in the context of the events, which is a platform for the show to actually expand in different directions. And guerrilla gardening is an example of an intervention which is partly political and partly aesthetic. It's about really bringing what the city is lacking into the city and bringing it in a sort of forceful and iconic way in order to make the message, not only the political message, but also the aesthetic message spread outside the gallery and reach the wider audience.
My name is Richard Reynolds and I'm a guerrilla gardener, which means I illicitly cultivate someone else's land without asking. And that land, for me, is public land and it's otherwise neglected land. One's eyes are opened when you start gardening in this way to the potential all over the place. So 4 years ago, over 4 nights, a group of about 20 of us cleared away that top layer, took that to the dump, and then planted in over 200 of these lavender plants. Guerrilla gardening is very much tangible, ongoing, long-term environmental activism. Putting plants in a place where they shouldn't be is of appeal to those with a primary political motivation and to artists as well. But in that context, the gardening activity itself does take a sort of second billing. My gardens and the gardens that other guerrilla gardeners do are entertaining and more thought-provoking, but it's subtler because the gardens need to survive and grow and do their part. And that for me is of greater satisfaction.
If you look at the exhibition today, it's a very important moment because all the issues that the artist raised are on the headlines of newspapers every day. But at the same time, the way that the artists are looking at them is a particularly original and poetic one, which sometimes exceeds activism in some way and suggests new ways of thinking about our relationship to the landscape or to the natural world.
Right, so we've just completely exploded everything that I just said and everything that I just set up with you about where art should be situated. And some of those conventions are incredibly important and they're the backbone of why it is we're all sat here. But also things have changed quite radically even in the last 50, 60 years. The way in which we place our work, what it means, how we intervene within power structures, it is all changing and shifting. I'm only going to go through 2 historical activists, and I'm going to give you 2 long bits of text on the screen because I know it can get a bit yawn-inducing. But I'm going to very quickly also mention Merle, Latham and Euclid and Maintenance Artworks, 1969 to 1980. The role of the artist for Euclid is that of an activist, empowering people to act and change societal values and norms. This agenda stems from a feminist concern with challenging the privileged and gendered notion of the independent artist. Now, even in the newspaper at the weekend, Tracy Emin was being asked whether or not the art world is sexist and whether or not it's difficult to succeed as a woman. You know, we're in 2014 and she's resolutely saying, of course it is. There is still a gender imbalance at play within art. That's not to say there aren't lots of people that have corrected it, but that's still something that's happening now. For Euclid, art is not fixed and complete. but an ongoing process that is connected to the everyday life, and her manifesto for maintenance art proclaims the infection of art by everyday mundane activities. Right, I'm coming back into this bottle. I'm just reminding each and every one of us that how it is we're connected to the power structures that we live within, and especially as makers, especially as artists, illustrators, designers, you have an incredibly powerful and unique voice. You just need to embolden it and learn about it and begin to understand it and listen to the thing that switches you on as a person. Got another clip. It's whistle stop, but I want to make sure that you get lots and lots of content today.
Here is my manifesto, written as a young artist, aged 30, who decided to survive even though she became a mother maintenance worker and fell out of the picture of her autonomous Western avant-garde heroes. I had an epiphany. If I am the boss of my freedom, then I name maintenance art. It is art and art history that must change. I wrote this in one sitting in a cold fury. Manifesto for Maintenance Art, 1969. Proposal for an exhibition, Care. Here are some excerpts. Roman numeral 1, ideas. A, the death instinct and the life instinct. The death instinct, separation, individuality, avant-garde par excellence. To follow one's own path to death. Do your own thing, dynamic change. The life instinct, unification, the eternal return, the perpetuation and maintenance of the species, survival systems and operations, equilibrium. B, two basic systems, development and maintenance. The sour ball of every revolution. After the revolution, who's going to pick up the garbage on Monday morning? Development, pure individual creation. The new, change, progress, advance, excitement. Maintenance, keep the dust off the pure individual creation, preserve the new, sustain the change, protect progress, defend and prolong the advance, renew the excitement. C, maintenance is a drag. It takes all the fucking time, literally. The mind boggles and chafes at the boredom. The culture confers lousy status on maintenance jobs equals low pay. Housewives equals no pay. Clean your desk, wash the dishes, clean the floor, wash your clothes, wash your toes, change the baby's diaper, finish the report, correct the typos, mend the fence, keep the customer happy, throw out the stinking garbage. Watch out! Don't put things in your nose. What shall I wear? I have no socks. Pay your bills. Don't litter. Save string. Wash your hair. Change the sheets. Go to the store. I'm out of perfume. Say it again. He doesn't understand. Seal it again. It leaks. Go to work. This art is dusty. Clear the table. Call him again. Flush the toilet. Stay young. D, art. Everything I say is art is art. Everything I do is art is art. Quote, we have no art. We try to do everything well. Balinese saying. E, the exhibition of maintenance art Care would zero in on pure maintenance, exhibited as contemporary art, and yield by utter opposition clarity of issues. Roman numeral 2, the maintenance art exhibition Care. 3 parts, personal maintenance, general societal maintenance, and earth maintenance. A, part 1, personal maintenance. I am an artist. I am a woman. I am a wife. I am a mother. Random order. I do a hell of a lot of washing, cleaning, cooking, renewing, supporting, preserving, etc. Also, up to now separately, I do art. Now, I will simply do these maintenance, everyday things and flush them up to consciousness, exhibit them as art. I will live in the museum as I customarily do at home with my husband and my baby for the duration of the exhibition, and do all these things as public art activities. I will sweep and wax the floors, dust everything, wash the walls, i.e. floor paintings, dustwork, soap sculpture, wall paintings. I will cook and invite people to eat, make agglomerations and dispositions of all functional refuse. The exhibition area might look empty of art, but it will be maintained in full public view. My working will be the work. B, part 2, general societal maintenance. Everyone does a hell of a lot of noodling maintenance work. The general societal part of the exhibition consists of interviews, a room of desks and chairs where professional interviewers will interview the spectators at the exhibition along these questions. What do you think maintenance is? How do you feel about spending whatever parts of your life you spend on maintenance activities? What is the relationship between maintenance and freedom? What is the relationship between maintenance and life's dreams? The responses should be personal. These interviews are taped and replayed throughout the exhibition area. C, part 3, Earth maintenance. Every day, containers of the following kinds of refuse will be delivered to the museum. The contents of one sanitation truck, a container of polluted air, a container of polluted Hudson River, a container of ravaged land. Once at the exhibition, each container will be serviced, purified, depolluted, rehabilitated, recycled, and conserved by various technical and or pseudo-technical procedures, either by myself or scientists. These servicing procedures are repeated throughout the duration of the exhibition. So, 42 years later, this manifesto is a world vision and a call for revolution for the workers of maintenance, for these are the workers of survival and sustainability. Look around. That's most of the people in the whole world. Together, if organized and in coalition, we could reshape the world.
Okay, let us crack on. Right, so when I graduated, one of the first things that I began to work with, in fact even before graduating, was, this is really simple, this manifesto, and if you like, it's the way in which I meet the world with my practice. So I'm always looking for three things, and if a commission is working across all three of these sectors for me, then things are really happening. Because I work with waste materials, and because the, if you like, people's knowledge of me working with waste materials is increasing, so quite often now I will get emails or telephone calls about large-scale waste. So one, material. Sometimes I will stockpile a material and keep it for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. If I've got space to keep it, then I will do. I had 7,500 ice cream containers for about 6 years, which I wasn't too sure what I was going to do with, but I knew they'd create one wall that I could keep neatly away, but I knew I really needed to use them. Sometimes it's a location. I've worked in a disused absolutely ramshackle Orthodox Jewish cemetery in Liverpool, which needed 25, 30 years worth of reconstitution. Now, I worked with those people to develop a relationship in which they would let me work with them in that space. So, religiously significant, but it's a waste space that's been left behind. So, material, location, commission. You will all be in the world, no matter what your discipline is. You may go and work for somebody and have long-term contracts, and you may be working for the next 10 years for the same employer. The likelihood is, if you stay within the arts profession, you will be having short-term contracts, which will be based upon relationships and commissions. If I can find a space or a set of, how do I put it? If I can find an environment that's hitting all three of these things, then my practice is working. Quite frequently I've got a location that comes up, and I might have a material that I've held on to for the last 5 years or 5 minutes, and it's perfect. I'll then look at one of the links that I'm going to show you at the end of this talk, and a commission will come into my mind's eye that I think to myself, goodness, if I can actually work with them at that graveyard, and they're okay about me putting this material into that space, then that commission in Belgium, goodness me, I could do exactly the same thing in Belgium, and then I could create a co-partnership between Belgium and Liverpool, or anywhere else in the world. And what I'm beginning to underline for you, if you like, is an elasticity in your thinking. So whatever the materials are that you're using, remember that they have an innate power within them. I could pick up the bottle, but I'm not going to. Think about the supply chains that utilise that material. Think about relationships you're already building. And then begin to start looking beyond the boundaries of college, even if you only just started, at where commissions are emerging. Are they for people that are students? Are they student competitions? Start to work with people outside of your spaces as well as within them. Right, this is a classic. Throughout in terms of what I'm just explaining to you. Throughout my time of studying, I worked in bookshops, and I worked in the UK's largest bookshop chain at the time, which was Borders. They've gone bust now, but what that meant is that I had access to lots and lots of marketing materials for absolutely nothing. Week in, week out, that machine, again, I could pick this bottle up, but the machine was producing lots and lots of information, material that was a really rich framework for me. At the same time, the building itself had lots of different spaces that hadn't been used for exhibition spaces before. Large atriums with windows, that as long as I worked with all the health and safety constraints of that building, I realised that the building managers were quite happy for me to work with them. So this was one of the big atriums where it was a big window. Well, as long as I went in at 6 a.m. in the morning, and as long as I had someone supervising my work with a big set of ladders, they were all right for me to do a slight responsive installation within that space. And as long as I made sure I cleared it up a week later. Again, your studio work, all the materials that, whatever it is that you're interested in, the materials that are, if you like, belched out by that system. On this left-hand side here, these are plastic gift cards. I've got thousands of these plastic gift cards. We used to have paper gift tokens, things like book tokens. Mostly, remember I spent hours and hours working behind the till while I'm studying. Mostly these had £5 put onto them, £10 occasionally someone might come and put £50 on them. They'd be used once, they'd be bent so no one could bring them back into the store and they'd be thrown into a bin. I'm talking about a global book sales, manufacture and distribution chain with no answer to how those plastic gift cards are recycled. I've initiated exactly the same conversation with Staples over the last year. They now use plastic gift cards for all of their photocopying. You used to go up to the person behind the counter, they would ask you how many copies you wanted, you would give them money, and they would do the recycling, they would do your photocopying. Now they give you a piece of plastic. These cards, because of the magnetic strips in them, are almost impossible to actually recycle. They'll last, again, 300 to 500 years. Think of the systems that surround you, the materials. If it's light falling on glass that you're passionate about, then harvest it. Bring it into your realm of what it is you're exploring. Look at who else, as a practitioner, has worked with that area of interest. You may not always know the names that are thrown at you, or that when people say that work is like this, you might often think to yourself, no, I'm quite original in what I do, I'm sure no one's done it before. There is a whole canon of people behind you. There are hundreds of people. It may be someone in the last 100 years that's been inspired by what it is that you're passionate about, but they were inspired by someone else and they were inspired by somebody else. Begin to get familiar with the way in which you label your work, you understand your work, and you understand how it's informed. Right. Much of that work surrounding waste was to do with physical waste whilst I was studying. And then, quite unexpectedly, in 2009, my mother died, and it threw me into this location in this space that I'd never been in before as a practitioner. I was really used to doing something that a theorist called Moustakis looks at, which is called indwelling. So I was really used to looking at this material and sitting in my little white studio space and going, what does it mean, what is it? And then suddenly there was this huge thing that occurred, which meant I didn't give two figs about those bottles any longer. What was in front of me was something massive that actually told me something about how we relate to each other. And what began from that point on, and connects with this plastic waste here, is the stories we connect with each other with and around and surrounding. And it began a body of work that made me realise, wait a second, this conversation about waste, about where we throw things when we've used them, is connected to our conversation about death and mortality. We are particularly good at consuming more and moving forward and think everything is going to be bigger and better. And we're not always so good at looking at the end of life stories, or even what we do with each other, even the comfort of how we hold each other's grief. And I began to make these parallels between what is physical waste and emotional waste. And therefore, when we don't, how do I put it? When we don't share stories collectively about mortality and death, it means we're not comfortable with understanding what happens with this space that we throw things into. And we don't place death and memorial at the centre of our stories in the way in which we used to. And if we look at the consumption of the planet, on my way in today, we were discussing on the steps on the way up to walking in. Yesterday, a report was produced that said in the last 40 years, half of the planet's species have been destroyed. So we've lost half of the planet's animal species in the last 40 years alone. Now, I say it to you, and I say it to you at this point, because I know this sometimes, when this slide comes in, sometimes I can feel a bit of a gasp in the room, because people are like, oh my God, she's talking publicly about death. I'm talking about it publicly because when we say disconnected from our power as consumers and image makers, as political beings, from our own end-of-life stories, that we can't see that we're losing half of the planet's animals in the space of the last 50 years. 40 years. 40 years. 40 years. I've been worse in 10 years, haven't I? There's something happening about our power as image makers and how we understand we're connected to each other. I'm going to skip on. Where are we on time?
You've got another 25 minutes.
Lovely. Okay. Now, at this point, I'd finished my fine art degree. So I started out in television that I mentioned to you, and I'd gone and worked in telly, and I thought, no, this is great. I know I'm working with images, and I'm working with moving images, and I'm working with lens-based work, but I really need to do fine art. That's what I've always wanted to do, even though I had my detractors who were like, what are you going to do with a fine art degree? What use is that? I knew it's what I needed to do. So I'd come back in, I'd taken my fine art degree at Liverpool. Then I'd had the experience with the situation with my mother, and I thought, okay, there's a groundswell here of knowledge that I know that I need to embed, both in practice and research. I need to understand where it's situated, so who has worked in this way before, where it's coming from, and there's a research question I want to investigate. So I went on to do an MA by Research in Manchester, and my research question concerned our social space of death and mourning in terms of autobiographical artworks. Out of that body of work, I developed a collective of women with 6 other women, and we set ourselves up, and you've got lots of opportunities coming up with Capital of Culture in Hull, I can't tell you. So Liverpool in 2008 was European Capital of Culture. So we decided, there were 7 of us as women, and we decided that we would set ourselves up as a collective that exchanged with women in other capitals of culture. We'd all graduated, we probably had an age range. I'd say there was a 20 to 25 year difference in our age ranges, so we graduated lots of different times, but we were able to place ourselves at a point where Liverpool was going to be getting a lot more traffic, a lot more people were going to be coming to the city, and we were a group of women that were saying, well, we want to look at sustainability models and how capital of culture affects you as a city, and therefore we want to look at other places in Europe that have been European capitals of culture, which brings me to Linz. The Arts Council funded our initial residency, and 7 of us as artists in Liverpool chose 7 artists that were working in Austria, and Linz in Austria had been a capital of culture previously. They funded all of us, so 14 artists, to have a show in Liverpool, and then we were all funded to go to Linz, to Austria. So that was off the back of a group of us as women going, well, we apply for lots of things, but lots of other people are applying for things. You know, some things you'll apply for, there'll be 600-700 people apply for it. I mean, week in, week out, I'm applying to things week in, week out, all the time, all the time. If I'm in the middle of a commission, then sometimes I don't, but every single week, what about this idea, what about this idea? Send it out, send it out, send it out. We sat there and said, well, hang on a minute, what about if we set up the structure ourselves? So rather than just applying for something that 300 or 400 other people are applying for, what if we set up something that is unique to ourselves and what it is we want to develop as a relationship? Remember, material, location, relationships? We had lots of material. We knew the location because it was another capital of culture, so the relationship was ours to build. And the Arts Council went on to fund us twice through 2 residencies, and the following 2 years later we actually went to Istanbul. Now, you can all begin those relationships now. You're doing it. You did it on your first day when you said hello to someone that you thought, oh, I think I might get on with you. You're doing it when you walk into each of the studio spaces and you think, well, I really like what you're doing with paint, but I'm doing this with film. Can we just explore that together? This is the foundation of what builds your practice, but also it means that you can be developmental in terms of how you generate your funding. You don't have to wait for it to come to you. So, let's show you this one. Right. I'm not going to say too much about this. Mauthausen is a concentration camp that is just outside of Linz. And there's no way on this earth that I thought to myself, oh, do you know what? I think what I really want to do when I go to Austria is make a film about a concentration camp. Yeah, I think what I really want to do is have the audacity and the ego to take lots of pictures of myself and put it in the context of a concentration camp. That wasn't anything that occurred to me when I arrived. What did occur to me in terms of this MA by research question that I set myself was, if I'm going to understand my personal concept of death, the intimacy of that situation between my mother and I'm going to communicate that in some way on a global level and a universal level, then what I need to look at is what's called the meta-narrative, so the overarching narrative of how it is we look at death. So in just the same way that you look at a mathematical equation, that's what ends up happening when you're working at a research level, at postgraduate level. You have to lock off your parameters. You have to look quite specifically. It's like it becomes quite technical in some respects, the way in which you understand the language you're using, but also the area that you're looking at. It's an area of investigation. And that's the point where something much more emotive happened as I walked in through the door. You know, as I walked in through those main gates of the concentration camp, you know, it's a subject that that is so enormous and so vast. All I could understand was that what I needed to communicate was something beyond this, something that you're listening to right now. Because the way in which I'm dressed, the things I'm saying, we've all got our responses to how I am talking to you now. And all I knew I wanted to communicate to the viewer was something beyond that. It was still going to be my face, because this is how we understand each other. It was still going to be eye contact. It's through the catchlights in your eyes that I can see that you're alive, that you're responding to me. And that's the only thing that actually on that film, it's 52 images of my face and the space that I'm looking at. And it's just the eyes that are actually located in the same space through the edit. It's the only thing. So what's the quickest way that I can communicate with you about the emotion of what it is I'm feeling in terms of that indwelling? It's to cut out this. It's to not speak, but to show you. So, okay. I was given access to 132,000 plastic knives and forks. And this is where some of my really large-scale waste work began. These are Asda, so they're Walmart as the parent company, plastic knives and forks. They're absolutely brand new, and they were discarded by that supply chain because there's two reasons. The knives and the forks are slightly different colour, and there's a slight error on the print run of the plastic. Now, 132,000 knives and forks as a material, especially something that is new, these two will take between 300 to 500 years to vanish, and even then they won't vanish fully. We have no way, this is made from a polystyrene exactly the same as a polystyrene cup. It's so cheap a material, the world's largest supermarket chain is offering this up in its cheapest smart price range, and they have no way of recycling this material. Now, location, material, commission, remember that relationship? Some of the things you'll do at the start will be paid, some of the things won't, and even later on down the line, sometimes you won't be paid, but the opportunity will be so amazing that you will go for it. I was given an opportunity to work with a music festival who basically is set up by a group of friends of mine, but what they do have are massive spaces in Liverpool. Big dock buildings, you've got exactly the same here. Vacant spaces that you can build relationships with. As long as you cover all your health and safety requirements, you can work in spaces that are far larger than the college probably has got access to. That's the place that you can put 132,000 knives and forks. Now, I'm aware of time, so I'm not going to play this to you now, and I am going to give you the PowerPoint, so you will have access to it. This will tell you a little bit more about this plastic, this link here, but as I said, you'll get this talk, because I want to keep going for a minute. Now, if I'm working with people about the value we place on the materials that we throw away, do I use those materials once? Well, I don't use those materials once, I keep using those materials, because if that material's still going to be here in 300 years, then I could easily work with these knives and forks for the rest of my career as a practitioner. 2012, Liverpool has a regional art prize. When you start to look at some of your industry press and you get into this, you get into where you're located, nationally and internationally, you'll start to see these things emerge. The Liverpool Art Prize is one of the there's only a few regional art prizes. I was longlisted for the Liverpool Art Prize, and once you're shortlisted, you then go on to have an exhibition. At the time, at a place called Metal, which is a fantastic organisation. They're in 3 places in the UK. It's called Metal Culture. They are in Southend-on-Sea, Peterborough and Liverpool. Really worth looking them up. They love to work with emerging talent. They have time and space residences, so you can go and work with them in their spaces. And they run the Liverpool Art Prize. This, the Liverpool location is on a working train station platform. It's where Stephenson's rocket went from, so it's the UK's oldest train station. And it's an art gallery, so it's still being used. People are getting off their trains, getting on their trains. It's one stop outside of Liverpool. And it has this tower. It's a cooling well, it was a cooling tower. I think it was a water tower. Not a massive budget. Remember, location, commission, material, but it's location, isn't it? I worked site responsibly. The budget was a very, very small budget. And all I could think to myself was, okay, I've seen lots of things in this tower, but I've never seen anything use the height of the tower. What can I use in the height of this tower that has its own internal structure as a material? So it's a listed building, so I can't go drilling. It was very minimal, the drilling. I could put 4 drill points into the actual walls. But what comes with its own structural integrity in terms of someone that works with the environment? Well, it's a tree, isn't it? Have I ever seen a tree in a tower? I don't think so. Have I ever done that before? No, I haven't done that before. Can I work with some people that are technicians that are the best at what it is they do so that we can locate this safely? Yeah, actually, I'm going to go and talk to them. I'm going to build that relationship and say to them, right, I've got a tree. It's a waste tree. Right, this tree was used by a nightclub. They took down 12 trees in the forest in Cumbria to place inside their big nightclub. They just strapped them to girders. And they were there for a year and they looked fantastic with a light on them. And because I'd done this music festival in the same venue, I could see they'd been thrown away. So I went to them and said, look, I know this sounds a little bit mad, but I've been shortlisted for the art prize. Right, location, material, relationship. When I say to them I've been shortlisted for the art prize, they then think to themselves, oh brilliant, hang on, we could have a co-sponsorship deal here. If you've been sponsored for the Art Prize, I can actually say to this person, because I've been shortlisted for the Arts Prize, we can run some sponsorship where you can actually be in the programme. So do you think I could actually have one of your 12-metre trees? Because it looks like you've thrown them away, and I work with waste, and it'd be really useful for this space because it's got its own structural integrity. It took them about 4 months to decide, but it was only one conversation, and then they were like, yeah, of course. Over the road from this nightclub, there was a big building, builders merchants. I'm going through the minutiae of this relationship with you so you understand that sometimes these aren't as big a conversation as you think it might be. I went over the road to the builders merchant and I said, look, been shortlisted for the Art Prize. It gets quite a lot of national press and some regional press, and I can do you a bit of a sponsorship deal. We can actually put your name in the programme. Any chance that you could actually lift this tree that I've got over the road? It's not even going to take you half an hour. You can just whack it on your low loader. The guy looks at the time and he's like, it's gone 4, we shut at 5. Could we do it now? I went, yeah, definitely. I've already got it in the right place. So it was a space of 45 minutes with 2 sponsorship deals done there, where I had the tree and it was delivered to the location. This neon sign, this is the 3rd part of this sponsorship deal. I wasn't aware, it's very rare, probably about 10% of the time I will make something from scratch that is new, that I'll fabricate. If I am making something new and I'm bringing something new into the world, I've got to be really clear about why I'm doing that environmentally, especially because I work with waste. Why would it be important for me to create something new and not work with something that exists already? Mostly because I'm going to put it into lots of different locations, and that's exactly what this was. This was the 3rd part of the sponsorship deal. I went to a sign manufacturers that I'd worked with before because I'd got really cheap vinyl lettering off them, and I said, look, went up, had last year's programme, I said, you see this company here, I'd really like to put your name there. Do you think there's any way in which you could sponsor me for the Art Prize? It opened up quite a difficult conversation because the person that I pointed to were actually the people that were their main competitors, and I wasn't aware of that. And the guy was like, well, not if they're working with them. And I said, well, I don't think they are working with them this year. That's why we could be working with you. And he went, well, leave it with me. Seemed a bit annoyed and angry, put it on one side, leave it with me. And the next day he rang me up, and that was the leverage for him to actually go, do you know what, yeah, actually, let's work together. They fabricated this neon sign for me, which is about £1,000 worth of neon sign, for nothing, as part of the co-sponsorship. You can see the plastic knives and forks. What happened is, the plastic knives and forks from the previous installation, people are used to looking at them. If you look at that film later on, you'll see why. They're used to looking but having no contact with them. For this work, you couldn't enter the work unless you stood on them. You couldn't get into the tower unless you broke them with your feet. Unless you felt the weight of your body destroying the artwork as you experienced it, you couldn't enter the space. So, where are we on time?
About 10 minutes.
Okay. So, 2012, that's the Art Prize. Off the back of some of that national coverage, a development agency in Cumbria then gives me a call and says, we really like your Art Prize piece, can you come and do it in Cumbria? And I'm like, oh gosh, let's remember location, material, relationship. I said to them, well, okay, that's brilliant, and I'm really honoured that you want to work with me, that's great, thanks. I'd love to develop a conversation with you. But environmentally, I can't just put my tree on a big low loader and drive it all the way up to Cumbria. What's my carbon footprint on doing that? Let's think about what I'm doing. Is there any chance that I can actually work with you and one of the locations that you work with, which is National Trust property in Cumbria, and we can look at your site and see whether or not you've got a waste tree that we could look at, because that then adds value to your conversation with me, and I can start to look at what's being thrown away on your site. On top of that, at the time, and I think we're still undergoing it now, but the ash tree was undergoing, all I can say is an onslaught from the Cholera fraxinea virus. So it's very, well, yeah, it's worth looking up. I've got a lot more information on the internet for you to look at here, but that was quite a hot topic for the National Trust to look at. For me to say to them, there's a disease that could take out all the ash trees in the UK. Do you mind if we focus the spotlight on that with you and this development agency and your site? Have you got an ash tree that needs taking down on your site? It doesn't mean necessarily it is dying from Cholera fraxinea. That could have been part of that project. But remember, whether it's a piece of plastic that's been part of a supply chain or it's a tree, everything has an embedded conversation that relates to how we value things. So an ash tree at that time was something that's quite important environmentally. And they said, well, do you know what, actually, I think we've got one that's growing out of a pigsty. We need to take it down because if that falls on the building that it's next to, then we're going to be in trouble. I'm like, brilliant. I've got the base that was manufactured by another company that sponsored me with the art prize. That base will take any tree up to 15 metres tall, so I can bring that with me. I've got a neon sign as well that actually is what underpins our understanding of what the work is, so I can bring all of the provenance of the previous piece, but we can talk about a new conversations to do with your site. This is what makes it site-responsive work. This is, unlike the first tower, this tower actually had a viewing platform, so you could experience this tree at canopy height. And that again is the neon sign. And I won't go into this link here either, but what this particular commission enabled me to do was spend a year having an open studio online platform. So I was also able to say to the commission, I tell you what, as your spaces that we're working with have never worked with a fine art practitioner, I'd like to open the doors on my studio and have a virtual studio with you. And I'd like to blog about this. I work right the way across a lot of the social media in terms of the conversations that I initiate. And this, the fact that you can blog for free and you can be open and responsive and have these conversations and then link it into your academia.edu and then find out who's working the way that you're working. It is a tool that I never had when I first studied. And that when you can bring that to a commissioner and say, well, actually, what I want to look at, because their commission was about artwork in trees, that was all they said. We see you've done something with the tree. Our commission's artwork in trees, do what you want. So I thought, okay, well, I'm living in an urban setting at the moment. I'm living in Liverpool. And this commission lasts for a year, on and off in Cumbria. What's the best way in which I can start to have a conversation where I utilise the skills that I have learnt while studying, just like yourself, so photography, intervention, installation, and actually put it into an open framework where I can generate content that's going to drive traffic, that's going to start conversations so I can learn more about what it is I'm doing. They were like, brilliant, yeah, that's great. We can retweet it on our Twitter feeds as well, and then we can actually add content to it. Now these, I doubt you'll recognise them, but these are actually the buildings that are, I wonder if I can explain where it is. You know in Hull where you've got the Chinese restaurant?
Mr. Choose?
What was that?
Mr. Choose?
Yeah, the one that's right out on the waterfront.
Yeah,
And then there's all those buildings next to it. Yeah, yeah. So these are those buildings next to it. Not that I'm advising that we all walk into ramshackle buildings, but let's think about waste again. Let's think about that supply chain of wood. That's where these images are taken from, all part of the same tumbler. Right, I'm going to show you this last one of these last, my last little excerpt to show you. Okay, so waste products, waste materials, end of line, end of story, memento mori, where we look at memorial, where we look at what happens when we're gone and the things that we use are gone. Now, does anybody, I'm going to ask the question before I say it, has anyone heard of this word Anthropocene before? Oh yes. Well, I'm gonna, yeah, go on. I'm going to do questions at the end. Yeah, go on. Do you know?
Okay, so it's the last mythological geological age containing around man's activities.
Right, we're very close on that. You're right. Now, again, location, material, relationship. Edge Hill University come to me off the back of the art prize and say, "We really like what you did with the art prize. Do you think you can come and do something at our site?" Usually, probably 50% of commissions sometimes say put the idea forward and then they commission you. If you're really lucky, you'll get a development commission, and this was a development commission. So Edge Hill University said, "We like what you're doing. We've got an art centre and we'd like to put some artwork there. We've also got a new Earth Sciences building that's opening, a geology building. Do you think you can come up with anything?" I'm going to play you the little clip actually. This one's an audio one. When I filled in my brief, when I wrote the brief for the commission, I said to the commissioner, you have to imagine this piece of work is as incongruent as a piece of aircraft undercarriage that's landed on the campus. It's a complete contradiction, it's a juxtaposition, it's something you would never expect to see here. So it's an almost exact replica of the Las Vegas welcome sign. It borrows all of the aesthetic from that 1950s classic design icon of the Las Vegas sign.
And can you tell me what it says on it?
So we've got a big star at the top, and it's cantilevered, so it's asymmetrical, and it says, "Welcome to the fabulous Anthropocene era."
And this era is the era that we might actually be in now.
The people that decide the names of the eras that we're living within are actually currently convening, and they've been brought together. They're some of the world's top scholars to compare notes on whether or not we've entered a new geological period. So they have up until 2016 to decide whether or not we're in the Anthropocene era. The reason in which people are starting to say, from ecologists to environmentalists and to geologists, are we in a new era? We must be in a new era. We can't still be in the Holocene era. Is because of the level of impact that we're having on the environment that surrounds us. Now, for some people, this period started. Some people are saying that this new period, the Anthropocene era, started with the Industrial Revolution. Now, and some people are saying it started with the Neolithic period. But basically, we're laying down permanent markers in the geological record. So we're talking species extinction, radioactive deposits in the soil. They're the kind of things that we can't actually change because they're irrevocable damage.
So it's basically, it's the era where we've made our footprint, basically.
Unfortunately, what the geological record tends to show us is the way in which we've treated the planet and the ecosystem. So yes, unfortunately, it's a marker for damage.
I understand all of that, but so why is that here? Are you kind of lecturing the students?
Okay, so I mostly deal with waste. So I quite often work with large-scale waste, and I quite often present the viewer with what could look like piles of rubbish. There are lots and lots of different ways to frame these environmental questions. And for me, one of the really most vital things about this commission is that I'm right in the middle of a university campus. It's a campus with 26,000 students. So for me, and this place and this space, I wanted to set up quite a direct and obvious, but hopefully visually captivating question to put together this contradiction between the Anthropocene era and the Las Vegas sign. Basically, a 1950s sign, a time of abundance, institutional investment, growth, even the embellishment of this star at the top for absolutely no reason whatsoever except for its own glory. I'm trying to say to people, look at this, and even the word fabulous, I've got to add that to it, because it says welcome to the fabulous Anthropocene era. I'm saying to people, take a look at what's actually happening around you. Have a think for a moment in terms of our actions, the cause and effect of what it is we do, the choices we're going to make. To explain a little bit more, it's also on quite a busy highway. So although it's a walking highway, it kind of mirrors the Las Vegas sign itself. You can't get to where it is you're going in this university, because it's kind of smack bang in the middle on one of their highways. So I'm both drawing the viewer in, because they're going, what's that? That's a complete contradiction. Right, I'm going to stop that there, because you can pick that up later, and I'm galloping towards the last couple of moments. I'm going to throw this in really briefly. Again, this is one of those terms that you might not use for the rest of the time that you're here, but you could also use this from tomorrow onwards. My approach in terms of my practice is what's called rhizomatic, and I hope I've illustrated that to you so far in terms of the different organisations that I work with, the way in which I set up those conversations, even with the college and its power structures and its buildings. So Deleuze and Guattari use the term rhizome and rhizomatic to describe theory and research that allows for multiple non-hierarchical entry and exit points in data representation and interpretation. Now what that means is you have an open playing field to explore your ideas and the models of representation and the places that you can put your work, not only in a virtual sense but a physical sense. Your perception is the only thing that's going to limit where it is you exhibit, and your confidence in some respects, which will grow in terms of the relationships you build, will be what frames where it is you place what it is you do. All right, last two slides. I can't say this. I can't say this strongly enough. So after the Art Prize, obviously, after that kind of thing, you get interviews and different questions and this, that, or the other. And I keep coming back to this, and I want to share this with you because if you can garner this as an approach now, if you can fan the flames of what it is that switches you on as people now, then it will make the difference as you progress. So what advice would you give recent graduates? Work consistently at the coalface of your narrative, your approach, your point of view. Read widely. Drink in the opportunities that life throws your way. Build bridges, start fires, nurture connections, stretch out to people that inspire you because of their way of working, their approach to life, their vision. Be bold. Try not to allow the exhibition of your work to be confined to the rooms of your minds. Your work needs the oxygen of an audience. It's in their minds that your work becomes activated. So often, as students, I've lectured myself and I still do it myself. I'll exhibit something in my head, or I say, I won't use that material because I think it'll do that. There's no point in me actually doing it. And I never do it. And I can assure you, your relationship with the material is different to your intellectual perspective of how you think a piece of work is going to work out. And often when I've worked with students, and I've done it myself as well, and people have said, but I really want people to feel this. Now you can see it's clear I've got a strong emotive response to the environment in terms of my work. What I try to do with the questions that I set and the environments that I create for the people that are experiencing them is set up a series of questions that ask them to question their motives. I'm not asking you to be appalled, because then it sounds like I'm screaming at you, and this is where some of the edges of the activism hit. We've all had it. Magazine comes through the door, or you pick up your paper and 20 different things fall out, and you look at it and you're at a point of complete apathy about how much you can care today because you're a bit tired and you think, do you know what, it's too much. So what I set up with these frameworks and these relationships is a series of questions so that you can question your own impact on the environment. Right, final slide. And I know you'll definitely need that in a printout, or because there's loads of content there. I will go through these really quickly. If you can begin to familiarise yourselves with things like Axis Web. Axis Web is an online curated portfolio, and it's a little bit like, have I got AN at that? Yeah, I have. Right, so, because it's curated, not everybody can join. They need you to be at a certain level in terms of your practice. But it's a portfolio that allows you with like a yearly subscription to actually access work. And I've had work come to me, I've had talks like this from people that have come to me and said, I've seen your work on Axis Web. It's a way to disseminate your work to people that may never have known what it is you do beforehand. Retitle is an international version of Axis Web. Again, online curated portfolio. It's commissioners, it's practitioners, it's people talking about work and ideas who are out there doing it. eFlux, international network of over 90,000 individuals, contemporary practice publications symposia. eFlux is a little bit like academia.edu, but with a lot more content in terms of articles in some respects. AN. Artist Newsletter, as a practitioner working in the UK right now, allows you, by joining them, to have your public liability insurance. The moment you step into the public realm and create work, you actually have a responsibility to how that work is, how safe it is, how you legally stand in terms of the impact you could have upon somebody else. I can't work as a practitioner without public liability insurance. By taking out my AN sponsorship membership, not only do I get the Artist Toolkit, which talks to you about how you price your work, how do you factor in your studio and the amount of paint you've used and the electricity, everything. It's a phenomenal resource. They advocate for artists' rights, they give you your public liability insurance, they have lots of artist talking blogs, look them up. Twitter, I've talked to you about Twitter. Curators are part of your conversation with how you meet the world. It won't just be commissioners. There'll be people in this room now who will go on to be curators, but curators can set up those conversations. Remember, material, relationship, location. I don't know if you have it as part of your course structure. Other universities I've worked at sometimes, their blogging is part of their course structure. I don't know if that's the case here.
Yeah, media courses.
Yeah, so begin your platforms now. Begin that conversation now. There are lots of different ways in which you can build your sites yourself. There's like Wix, I think Weebly, there's lots of free sites for this as well. Blogs, Tumblr, WordPress. It's an open studio space where you can show the world what it is you're doing, but you can actually then ask for critical comment about that work. Yeah, Arts Council England, regional officers, I cannot begin to say enough how important it will be as you exit university to start to understand who these people are. They may well fund you to do things you never thought you were going to be able to do. Weekly, this here, the Arts Council has both a jobs and a news weekly email. It's dead simple to sign up, just go to the Arts Council website, think top right hand corner it says, do you want to go on our mailing lists? This is where I find lots of the jobs that I apply for every Sunday night. Every Sunday night the email comes through. Sometimes I have 360, 370 jobs. Everything from literally everything. I think at the moment there's a little bit of a slew on there of Father Christmas adverts and things like that. So there's lots of theatre things as well, but a lot of the commissions are on that, and their news. find out who's doing what where. It's a weekly email, it doesn't cost you anything. And I think that's the end of me speaking.
Thank you very much. So thank you, Robyn. I think what we'll do is we'll run over slightly, and I know some people have to get to classes at 2 and probably fit in a lunch, is if you're interested in asking a question and listening to the responses, stay behind. But I'll leave it as an opportunity for those that have had to sit down maybe for too long to go.
I just wanted to get through past slides. I know
Now
this
it's
one.
when you build an engine in, don't you? And you do that. I know a few of them are a bit twitchy. It makes the questions less clear in the head.
I did it all right. Just the bottom bit.
Probably pick the other way.
There were enough people out. We'll put it back. Yeah, well, good.
Yeah, I've got to.